Please briefly summarize your industry education, professional background, and current role at WSP.
I graduated from Oregon State University back in the late 70s and spent a 34-year career as a civil engineer at Washington State Department of Transportation. I worked in a variety of areas throughout that agency's programs, but my last 6 years, I was the Secretary of Transportation for Governor Gregoire. From there, after 34 years, I retired from the state and began working at WSP. I've been here 9 years now, and my job at WSP as a national transportation market leader is to work with the public agencies mostly, but supporting their efforts in emerging technology, transportation topics, such as resilience, pricing, systems operations, and performance management. Really any strategic or tactical efforts that they have to try and improve their transportation systems, I try and connect our company and the work that I've done in the past to help them succeed in their goals.
So how does WSP fit within the infrastructure industry?
WSP has been around for over 130 years, so we are a well-established company, both nationally in the US and globally. We approach transportation development in a cross-disciplinary strategy. We have energy, buildings, transportation, water, and environment markets, which really is perfectly suited to the way that the infrastructure bill that was just passed is developing and helping communities update, retrofit, make their systems more resilient. Our approach is to develop new and innovative solutions to the most significant challenges that our clients have. And our capabilities in transportation, specifically where I work, is in building transportation systems that connect with and are integrated with all of those solutions that our customers want. Folks leave their houses in the morning and they don't care if they're getting on a state highway or a county road or a city street or transit. They want to get to where they're going and be able to have a livable and a wonderful community in which they live, and that's all connected by the infrastructure. Transportation in particular is one that is in a transformation phase. We're working hard in the industry to really bring innovation and alternative delivery and strategies that will help our systems be more environmentally friendly, equitable, but also address the needs of travelers and the economic demands of a growing United States. And the communities in our country are really striving to find a place where they can ensure that they have a good quality of life, reconnecting some of the communities that have been severed in the past from the transportation decisions and investments that have been made, and make the entire transportation system accessible and equitable. And that's a hallmark of what WSP is focusing on.
How are current deficiencies in bridge infrastructure different than problems in other forms of infrastructure? And how did it get this way?
It's been a long time coming in trying to get our nation's aging infrastructure back up to a place where it is ensured to be safe and accessible, as I mentioned before. I participate on the ARTBA, American Road Builders Association Executive Board, and ARTBA does a lot of work around trying to identify the conditions and report and advocate for better investments. And one of the reports recently called out the 1 in 3 bridges in the United States that's in need of repair or replacement. So just from a bridge standpoint, that's significant. We have had underfunding for many years. As we recall, the last at least federal investment in gas tax increase wasn't since 1993. And as a regressive tax, it's losing the purchasing power on a flat tax that it is So we're looking for alternatives to more fairly and equitably develop a user fee system that will really pay for the use of the system as travelers use it. But with this underfunding, we're finding that there aren't just aging issues. Remember, we built the interstate back in the 60s and 70s after the Interstate Act in 1956. But that Eisenhower system that was built is now 60, 70 years old. And think of the bridges just on the interstates, for example, that were built and have not had the kind of repair and maintenance that they've needed. Plus, we have a growing population. And so we're trying to address the mobility needs, the growth needs, as well as aging issues for bridges. And now we have extreme weather. Those kinds of impacts and natural threats to the system have really highlighted and focused the need to make sure that we're addressing and identifying what the vulnerabilities of our transportation system is, not just bridges. Bridges can be most catastrophic if they fail, but your everyday highways, freeways, and roadways in your local area are being impacted by river flooding, avalanches, earthquakes, wildfires, all of these things now that are extreme threats to our transportation system and our communities. So we're very intent on helping people identify what their resilience needs are, how they work that into their asset management work to try and identify how to make the right investments so that the infrastructure is prepared and ready to react to impacts to the system, but also that it will be open and available for people who want to travel.
Until the new bridges and infrastructure can be built, how can we improve inspections and problem detection? Are remote sensors a viable solution?
When we think about the number of bridges in the United States, which I don't happen to know the number, but we understand that 1 in 3 of them are vulnerable and in poor condition, we realize that inspection is going to help guard from failures of bridges and to understand where those needs are. The national bridge requirements are that every bridge be inspected every 2 years. So at least there's that, and that's the visual inspections that are necessary. As we've gotten better over the years, over my 40-some year career, and I'm not a bridge engineer, but I've worked around a lot of them, as we've gotten better at understanding not just the threats to a structure and the elements of a structure and which ones are most vulnerable to failure, inspection protocols have increased. There have been better ways to detect deficiencies, and standards have been increased over the years to make sure that bridges as they're built are hardened and can withstand some of these threats and have a longer service life. When you talk about new ways to inspect, there is some exciting things. Unmanned aerial systems, drones are a good alternative tool that are emerging on the scene, and they can be used in some areas in place of the traditional survey and mapping that is required with the inspections. It's especially effective when you have high bridges and risky inspection techniques where you hang the inspectors over the bridge in the cherry picker type truck. It makes it safer for them, safer for the traveling public, and they can provide much more detailed information than traditional survey techniques. So very good. And Federal Highways is working with the state DOTs to find which are the appropriate solutions for aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles that they can accept in their bridge condition reporting. The other information or idea around monitoring bridges are the sensors, as you mentioned. An example from my own time at Washington State DOT was when we had the Alaskan Way Viaduct along the shore of Seattle's core waterfront downtown area damaged in the 2001 earthquake in Washington State. we had a double-decker bridge that was very vulnerable in a liquefaction sense to another larger earthquake. So we worked very quickly to make repairs and strengthen the existing bridge while we found a solution to that viaduct, knowing that it needed to either be replaced, repaired, or torn down. So while we worked, we put sensors, we made some repairs and put sensors on the bridge to monitor whether there was any additional movement. At that time, there was some sinking of the foundations that we were monitoring. And if they got above a certain point, then we knew we had to shut the bridge down. And luckily and fortunately, the intermediate repairs we made held the test of time until the new underground tunnel was built. And that project is in service and is a beautiful piece of infrastructure that has also opened up Seattle's waterfront again to the public, and it's a really great place to see. So sensors are good, but can you imagine trying to fit every bridge in the United States with a system of sensors, or use some of the unmanned aerial techniques on every aspect of a bridge inspection? That's not quite going to happen, but you can't replace the eyes on the bridge, the personal inspections that have to happen. But I think as we see bridges fail around the country, knowing they've been vulnerable, and we start to see some of these really high visible issues where it gets people's attention all of a sudden, that these bridges are vulnerable and we have to address them. Thank goodness the infrastructure bill is placing, the new one is placing at the national level a lot of attention on bridges. And the additional money that will come from not just bridge repair and replacement, but for infrastructure investment, highways, roadways, and an emphasis on preserving our national systems. I think we're going to see a change in the condition of our bridges, our highways, as well as some great investments that are coming from that bill.
So what are some other transportation infrastructure problems that don't get as much high-profile attention, but should?
What else shouldn't be addressed? It's an interesting time. Having been in, as I said, in the industry for as long as I have, and in working at the state DOT, where we had responsibilities for not just roads and highways, but the nation's largest ferry system. We had short line rail lines, we had airports, and we supported our local agencies' transit development. You start to see that years of neglect of funding, of really not just taking care of those assets, but modernizing them to remain safe and accessible, and to make sure that your communities, as they're growing, at least in Washington State where I live, our West Coast states or cities are growing so quickly that we can't keep up with having an infrastructure that can serve that amount of population. So while we see that bridges are getting quite a bit of attention in the press right now, unfortunately, there will be money spent, probably not nearly enough. It's really an important time, I think, to start looking at the way the infrastructure bill was put together, because I think it's very elegant in that it's the IIJA, or however it's being termed, bipartisan infrastructure law, really did look at a community-based, all-in infrastructure approach. Broadband now is being discussed in how to get high-speed internet connections to communities, water, energy, addressing resilience. All of these things together, to me, is the way that integrated approach to providing infrastructure for a community or for a state or a region really need to be considered. No longer as a country and a group of professionals should people be trying to solve just one problem, a highway from here to there, or an interchange that connects this freeway to a downtown. What happens when those people who live in that community don't have good access for internet service. How can a business, why would a business want to site their business in a town that doesn't have basic infrastructure? So the infrastructure connection to the economy is so strong that all of these infrastructure elements, I think, are necessary. And that's what I like about the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the fact that equity is a focus now for this administration, and the recognition that our transportation decisions that we've made in the past, think about the interstate systems and how they run through the middle of major cities, and what they may have done to build those, and what communities they may have severed. There's real recognition of the harm that's been done in the way that some of our infrastructure has severed communities, both from either side of themselves or their ability to get to services today. So I like the fact that this new bill is really going to focus on clean energy solutions, great environment, water issues, clean water, reconnecting communities, and building a basic connected infrastructure that really does serve both the economic and value of life or livability issues for communities.
So what should our engineering audience in particular be thinking about in their work in terms of technology and its adoption in transportation infrastructure? What do they need to know?
Technology can help us. It is our friend. And as folks are thinking about how to adapt the transportation systems of the past, think about the last 40 years of building, trying to serve people's whims on where they want to drive. We now are in a mode of, we can't expand our transportation systems, perhaps nor should we, to the way that we might have in the past. And we're now moving into an operating mode. Yes, reconnecting corridors that don't work, there has to be continued building, but we now need to operate our transportation systems in a way that technology can serve for a more efficient throughput, more reliable transit trips. And there's a connection to revenue and how you might collect user fees for the use of the system. I think it's more important now than ever for integrated transportation decisions to be made, not just how to build or modernize a freeway and interchange, et cetera, but how does that connect to the local trips, the transit trips, the micro mobility, the pedestrian and bicycling needs of that community. You have to think, I think, broadly and connect transportation engineering decisions to the community values and the actual users' needs of what they want in a transportation system. So the more seamless we can make our integrated network and the way that our transit and our highways work together to get people to where they're trying to go, all the better. I think that the opportunities that the infrastructure bill has brought to us with increasing spending, not just on Amtrak services, passenger rail services, but the ability that it envisions for new rail corridors and high-speed transportation allows communities in a state or a corridor to start thinking together about how to serve their regional and more statewide needs. Here in Washington, we're conceiving of a mega region concept of the Cascadia corridor between Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, Vancouver specifically, British Columbia, of a high-speed ground transportation that, as we envision another 4 million people moving into this area in this corridor, how we can shape a future that will help then serve the long-term needs and transportation requirements of a community. So we're envisioning a high-speed rail or some kind of ground transportation that will help our region grow together. And I don't think that in the past we've all thought as regionally, perhaps as we should have. And the communities within those regions, I think, are going to start planning, envisioning, and talking together about the integrated services that they need for transportation. It will be important for the engineering, planning, and transportation community by and large to really pay attention to efforts on research and development of new innovations, because the world is changing so fast from a technology standpoint, and an opportunity to do things differently, that we can learn best from each other and spend the time to do specific research and test some innovations so that we can find those best practices that will really launch and leverage our ability to make a difference more quickly.